live according to YouTube, which is a bit buggy today. Let me just check in a different browser because this is freaking me out. Yeah, we are live, and I think the volume is doing well. So welcome to the weekly webinar. I'm Mateo from Arcade, and last week we were building a Telegram bot on the spirit of things like OpenClaw and similar kind of chatbots / personal agents. And I got so that was motivated by a customer that what they wanted to do is basically do a safe version of setups like OpenClaw and safe and multi-user, right? So they wanted like a very complex harness, which I think is very cool and all of that. And I wanted to replicate some of the questions that I got from them, because one of the things that Arcade requires if you want to make a quote-unquote multi-user agent is a custom user verifier. And what that means, and let me show you one thing from actually the MCP protocol. Model content protocol.io. I'm gonna put my screen here. If we go to the specification and elicitation and we go all the way to the end, there is security considerations and safe URL handling, right? Where is it? Phishing here. So it says, let me just mute my other computer. It says phishing, right? So and this is one of the attacks that implementing a custom user verifier essentially avoids, right? So phishing is essentially gaining access to somebody else's account by either convincing them to give you or the attacker their password, or having a way for them to authorize your access to their confidential resources, right? So in this case, what it says is URL mode elicitation returns a URL that an attacker can use to send to a victim, right? So the idea is you go to the MCP server will generate a auth URL that is meant for a specific MCP client, right? And there is an assumption there that may not hold true, which is the user that registered to this app or whatever is the same user that's gonna click this link. So if I grant a token for that specific thing, we, as the server developer, the resource developer, we believe or we assume incorrectly that that's the user that's gonna get access to the protected resource, right? And that is not necessarily true, right? So here is an example where this is not true. It says the MCP server must verify the identity of the user who opens the URL before accepting information, right? And that is very important, right? So typically, identity verification is done by leveraging the MCP authorization server to identify the user through a session cookie or equivalent in the browser, right? For example, URL mode elicitation may be used to perform OAuth flows where the server acts as an OAuth client of another resource server. What this means is, for example, your MCP server integrates, it's the proxy to somebody else's resource, like Google, right? Or LinkedIn or something like that. And the idea here is that the MCP authorization server should or must verify the identity of the person that's gonna get that URL, right? So it says, without proper mitigation, the following phishing attack is possible. A malicious user, Alice, connected to a benign server, triggers an elicitation request. For example, it says, list my emails or get me some private data, right? The benign server generates an authorization URL acting as an OAuth client of a third-party authorization server. That could be Google, for example. Alice's client displays the URL and asks for consent, right? So far, so good. The client is doing its job. It's presenting the URL as the elicitation capability requires. And then it says, instead of clicking the link, Alice tricks a victim, Bob, of the same benign server into clicking it. Bob opens the link and completes the authorization, thinking they are authorizing their own connection to the benign server, right? The benign server receives a callback redirect from, I think this should be from the third-party authorization server, and assumes it's Alice's request. The token for the third-party server are bound to Alice's session and identity instead of Bob's, resulting in an account takeover, right? So this sounds very complex, and it has a lot of steps, but you can imagine this is quite simple actually, right? So it says here, to prevent this attack, the server must ensure that the user who started the elicitation request, the end user who is accessing the server via the MCP client, is the same user who completes the authorization flow. There are many ways to achieve this, and the best way will depend on the specific implementation, right? And there is an example here, which is pretty much what Arcade will implement using a custom user verifier, right? It says, as a common non-normative example, consider a case where the MCP server is accessible via the web and desires to perform a third-party authorization code flow. To prevent the phishing attack, the server would create a URL mode elicitation to its own thing rather than the third-party authorization endpoint. This connect URL must ensure the user who opened the page is the same user who the elicitation was granted for. It would, for example, check that the user has a valid session cookie and that the session cookie is for the same user who was using the MCP client to generate the URL mode elicitation. This could be done by comparing the authoritative subject from the MCP server's authorization server to the subject from the session cookie. Once that page ensures the same user, it can send the user to the third-party authorization server where a normal OAuth flow can be completed, right? This is kind of the reverse of what Arcade does. So if we go to Arcade, which implements another way of implementing that, we go to user-facing agents, secure auth and production. And maybe this will change name because there's a bunch of feedback internally about how custom user verifier is something that it's not easy to remember, it's not easy to know what's happening and why you need to implement it, but it's essentially to avoid that account takeover attack, right? So the way this works is you build a route, and instead of you capturing the initial URL mode elicitation route, what you do is you do send them to Google or whatever third party, and then when that auth flow finishes, you redirect to Arcade, and Arcade redirects to your app, right? So the burden, because Arcade is basically a middleware that will provide all of these kind of control plane user management capabilities to your agents and to your clients. So to avoid that phishing attack, the burden of actually verifying the user is on your end, right? So instead of doing the route of wrapping that initial URL, what we do is we challenge your app with a flow ID, and the same condition must be true, right? Your user must have a valid cookie or session in the browser that started that WAF flow, and your app will know who that user is, right? So when you start the specific authorization flow or the URL, you already bind the user ID to that specific user. And the way you do that with an Arcade client, for example, is here in calling tools, overview, in custom applications, authorized tool calling, right? We have these client tools authorized, and you must pass the user ID. Right? So when you do this and you have a custom user verifier endpoint activated, what happens is you will get, in this case, Google's OAuth URL from Arcade, and that will redirect to Arcade, and Arcade will check that you need to verify this user, and then it will challenge your app with the specific flow ID, and your app started this authorization request on behalf of this user. So to close that loop, essentially, you call this confirm user. Let's see, yes, confirm user with the flow ID that Arcade just sent you with the user ID that started that very same session, right? That's how your app has the burden. So your app has the knowledge of who the user ID was initially when you requested a tool execution on their behalf. And then when the flow ID comes back, as long as that happens within an authenticated user session, you are effectively able to complete the challenge and say, okay, for this flow ID, this is the correct user, right? And why you know that is because all of that process happened within a specific session, right? So let me open my terminal. Ghosting Tmux. Telegram verifier, and let me just show you very quickly how does this look like, right? So we have a lot of things. We have database, config, index, LLM, messages, and so on and so forth. The architecture of the app is quite simple, nothing very major. But there is something that I do want to add, and let me just see. I believe I have this bound to my multi-user example only. Right? Let's just confirm that this is not the one. Telegram verifier bot. And if I go to the API keys, it ends in NDD, and let me just verify that that is the case. So I'm gonna go here, and I'm going to put my face for a moment while I verify that that is indeed the correct thing. And yes, we are all good. I'm gonna restart my terminal and go back to the screen. Telegram verifier. So run. I don't remember if this was bundle level, I think. Better off, base your not be determined, whatever. I think that's okay. Arcade verifier bot is the thing that was initialized, and let me open Telegram. Oops, not there. Here. Arcade verifier bot, and I'm gonna just clear that conversation. Clear chat history, and let's see if this makes sense. Well, for now we have a split view where it kind of makes sense. Maybe I need to actually send that to another window and then say start, right? Then we see that the server is replying, starting streaming the thing. You say, I'm your Slack and Gmail assistant. I can help you with Slack and Gmail, right? And I can say something like, I don't know, summarize my latest email. Let me see who is connected here. Connected users. Is that specific user? I believe I will retain that from Telegram. I'm not sure though. Let's check. Yeah, that's correct. So let me revoke the access and see what happens, because I believe this user verification needs to go to localhost 3000 verify, but I'm not logged in at the moment, so we'll see what happens. Here I go again to Telegram. I'm gonna just clear. Alright, and then summarize my latest email. Right, and it will tell me authorize Gmail these emails with the specific of link. Open, and this should send me to the specific endpoint here. Well, I'm not sure what happens here. Well, oh my god, actually don't have memory of this specific account, so I will just register a new one. Oh my god, Jesus. Okay, I simply don't remember the password. Doesn't matter because I own the server, but it does mean I need to nuke the database, so I can't verify that user. And the good thing is that we didn't get the connection until I actually can verify the user. Right, so let's see, where's the data? Be, let's say I forgot password. Let's delete all users so I can register again. And what that will do is I also need to clear this conversation, so that I can get the prompt, because the initial message of this Telegram bot is gonna be, hey, I don't know you, Telegram user, whatever, you need to create an account, and it will give me a link to create a new account. Right? There's safe version, reset user password, the only user. There should be a single user. Just delete it. Alright, cool. So now if I go to my Telegram bot and start a session, it should tell me to register and give me a link to the registration thing, right? If I happen to start the server actually, right? Okay, and it tells me use this token, then register. Perfect. I'll register. Now summarize my latest email. Called successfully, that's interesting. Shouldn't have access to. Well, it did. Why do we get it verified? Okay, let me see. Summarize my latest email. Okay, yeah, so that was verified, and that's so good because this came from here. Well, it immediately came here to this other verification endpoint because I am redirecting back to the bot immediately so that it opens here directly, and now I should get a response at some point. It did add this, which is fine. I think the problem I'm having is because if I'm not logged into the system, the verifier has a dead end essentially, because I'm not redirecting to the login flow while keeping that flow ID alive, right? So I need to basically have a specific path. Right? Please do live every day. I can start doing that, but I need to find a good time to do it. It's an issue because I have a lot of meetings at this time the rest of the week. So normally the time I have free is my mornings, which is very early for like San Francisco time. So we'll see. I think my bot is dead. Hello? Let me restart the server. Okay, now I revive, but there is some it's getting stuck somewhere. Yeah, it was just like, what can I say with, yeah, whatever. I'm gonna clear everything. Conversation cleared, and then yeah, it kept all of this residual information from the last session that it was not saved, because I believe that this is saved in memory, like in RAM at the moment, and I should actually be saving this somewhere like a Redis or somewhere that is fast, but also okay. So this is start. I'm just system. I'm gonna do this. That's all fine and good. Okay, so what I want now is if I go to local this, I want to log out, right? Because I now know finally the password, right? So you just have the password. So I want to log out and figure out if I log in. So if I revoke my access to Gmail again and I restart the process, saying summarize my latest email please, this should trigger that tool call and also trigger that OAuth flow, right? Calling this, authorize, and it's gonna tell me if they want to open. You see here that this is the Google Auth, right? So when I open this, it's directly this. If we follow the elicitation description here, we would go first to the bot and then to this. So if I approve a consent, allow, I just want to check here. No, yeah, it's too late, but okay. Okay, but then authorize successfully. How? Want to know? Login. Oh, because payload, initiator, brief 5 flow. Okay, I see. It's storing this in like cookies, session. But maybe you already cleaned it up, right? You need to check what happens. This is a 2ID. So it came from this. Okay, so that works, which is fine. So if I reload this, it should be logged in, and we should have my summary, right? What I'm thinking right now is I want to implement user-specific capabilities for this harness. Like giving it access to specific tools, for example, and add them to that specific user, right? Or implement things that would be nice in a harness, like, human in the loop, for example, or optional human in the loop. But I don't know how to open a new session on Telegram without logging in, and I don't have another Telegram account. Okay. Okay, let me just figure that out first. So I achieved what I wanted to do for today, but let me figure it out. So web use message text. Here we are in the tool calling, but I think like the problem I'm having at the moment is that the way this bot is designed, the tool bucket is common because each session essentially happens just here, right? We get the chat ID, and that will become the user's ID, basically, right? And it will be connected to their account on the web. But if I want to have more sophisticated harness patterns, like the specific tools based on their Telegram ID, I need to initiate the agent specifically for that user, right? So each user will have their agent, and there is a whole life cycle problem there because I don't want to keep those agents, like multiple agents, alive just in case the user happens to write a message, which maybe in a second from now, but also it could be next week, next month, right? I want to free up the resources for these users, and at the moment this is easy because the processing happens per message, independent of which user is writing. But if I wanted more complicated logic, I can do simple things for the tool bucket that I have today, which is like give the user the ability to switch on and off specific tools, for example, and I can just store that as an array, right? Like or a map or whatever, a JSON configuration that will be loaded whenever that user has a new message, right? The tools here, right? Will be configured in that way, right? Because here I can essentially capture every tool, right? So instead of calling the tool, I can do, for example, like a check before. Is this user concerned about that, for example? And if they are, then react based on that, right? That is gonna be too long to implement today though, so I'm gonna leave it for next week. Today I'm happy with just having the full flow working, so enforcing that the user is connected, rerouting the login flow to to Telegram, for example, to the client. And I'm thinking now there is a new addition to Arcade that is almost perfect for the thing that I want to do, which is if you go to create tools, build a tool, here you say add metadata to tools. So this is a good way to start getting the information that we need for the agent. So the client may choose like, okay, this alright, we can essentially predefine some logic that will tell the agent what to do, or the harness how to react initially for new users, for example, so that you start it in, you know, secure mode or whatever, right? And we can look at these definitions. Let's do that first so that I have a better plan. Script. I think, let's see what's on utils. Okay, tools, get all tools from MCP server. Get all tools. This will just give me all the tools, paginate through, and I want a new one. Start here. List to missions by server UI from KP from utils. Okay, tools import. Get all tools from SP server. Okay. SP server. For now, I'm just gonna hardcode it. Email. I'm gonna put that to do. Make this an argument. I want to get Cloud to fix that, but then I want to say Gmail tools, get all tools, SP server for tools, and okay. I need list tools for async IO and wait. Actually, don't need a client. Classification. destructive false. So we can use this information to have a decent starting point, like destructive false. Right draft is destructive false. Read only true. Who am I? Update draft. Send email destructive false. Read only for open world. Operations create. That's interesting. Operations delete. Trash email. Operations create. Let's see what's the metadata. So the metadata that we have operations so create, I would say, is something that may require human in the loop. Yeah. I think I'm gonna start using this to define the default behavior of the harness when it comes to human in the loop. Like if I get these three, I will suggest asking for permission, but read should not ask for permission initially, right? And that will depend on the specific harness, but it's very domain dependent. So yeah, for now this should be good. So okay, I'm gonna leave it here because we are already more than 40 minutes in. So yeah, until next week, we are going to be using this metadata to implement good defaults for harnesses. But then this could be extended, and I will show you also how to implement harness patterns that would be something like, okay, ask for permission once, but then store this configuration, like allow list this specific tool for the entire session, and what is even a session in a bot that lives kind of forever, like in Telegram. So we will discuss that next week and show you how to implement it. So until the next time, guys.